Tansei, hello, welcome back. I'm Sipiko Waskatawi Win, Blue Lightning, and I'm here this evening to continue with part two of my heritage, my life, my existence, and my world view, my cosmic view, where it came from, and my little bit of knowledge and history of my people, some of the legends and my ancestors' life a little bit, right? So where I left off was Louis Ann Mustus, or Headman Mustus, as history knows him. Finished dealing with a spiritual being known as the Wendigo, and the elders had a ceremony for him the ceremony for the medicine men that were involved with the capture of Wendigo, and they all had to pick up these ice spikes that the spiritual being threw up, and what ended up happening was the ice spike that Mustus picked up melted for him, so he had to kill the spiritual being that was well captured, right? And when he did that, the being like melted, like it fell apart like ice, and the bones were transformed into these little black sticks, but the head was still in shape of that creature. So he had to do a ceremony to get rid of that being, and after he did that, they ended up doing a ceremony to build like a barrier for the area to keep the portal from opening again or whatever, right? Like it was like it was like a blessing for the area kind of deal. And later on, when the people moved in, settlers, they wanted to know what was that area like, because they seen all these things that were set up, ribbons and whatnot, and little pillars, and yeah, they told them like what happened there, the legend of that, and the priest ended up renaming it, named the place Foss, because that meant evil ground, or bad ground or something, bad soil or something like that. But after Mustus dealt with that spiritual being, he was known in the area as like a Wendigo hunter or Wendigo killer. So whenever there was something like that came close to that, people always sought him out for help. And he was always known across the land for a lot of his healings, and that's really what he was known for, was his healing and his ability and knowledge of the plants, and so he had helped a lot of folks out there across the land in Alberta, and the only other case like that came down to that he used to talk about was there was one of them that actually transformed far enough, and they're chasing it across the land. There was like a whole bunch of hunters from different tribes, and they're tracking it and chasing it across Canada, and it went up to north, like in Alaska, and as it was getting out there, it had wings by that point, and the thing like flew off into the space, like it took off through the clouds. That's what they used to say, and Mustus was always like, maybe it will return one day, and the warriors will have to fight it again. You know what I mean? And that's what they thought, right? Maybe it just flew off somewhere else, right, and went somewhere else in the world or Earth or something, went attacked somewhere else, and somebody else defeated it, or So what I was getting at was he was known in the area for healing a lot of people and helping a lot of people out when it came to spirituality and things like that. And he was very good at communications with people across the nations, and that's what put him in perfect spot. Like, so when the commissioner came down in 1899, they wanted to make like a treaty 8, but the treaty, the rights in there didn't really reflect any of our core values as like hunters or fishermen or people of the land or spirituality. It didn't really reflect any of our rights to any of that. So they had to like Mustus rewrote them and said, we want to renegotiate these treaties because it doesn't reflect any of what we discussed. So they had to come back down again for a second meeting, and that was June 21st, 1899. It was like around like 1 o'clock. They ended up rolling up to like in the afternoon, when they rolled up to the shore of Willow Point and on western side of Lesser Slave Lake, and they did the negotiations there in the field, and they pretty much rewrote it for like for our rights to hunt and fish and live in the land, and our rights to spirituality, and not on top of that, a lot of agricultural rights and things of that nature, medical rights, schooling rights, and the list goes on. But which should be like they were necessary, right? Necessary things. And so they ended up making that treaty, Treaty 8, in that time, because with Mustas, because they wanted to speak with a chieftain, and we didn't have a chief like out here. Like there was no chiefs. Like no, our people didn't have chiefs. That's just a made up thing by like Western and like I should say like European like mindset. They always needed a king or a queen or somebody, so they always say, "Where's your chief?" Like we didn't have like, so realistically we're just free people, but they all looked to Mustas, like Louis and Mustas, for advice, and so they went to him, right? And they're like, "Can you come speak for us, right? What do you see? Like, should we sign this treaty? Should we do this?" And so like Mustas, all right, so like this is before the signing of the second treaty. That's right. So this is before this time, and he conducted a second ceremony, and there was a lot of people who seen the ceremony, and there's a lot of mixed up tales of this ceremony. So Mustas conducted a shaking teepee ceremony. A shaking teepee ceremony is a very excruciating, I should say, like experience that somebody would undergo, and he like, so the way it works is they had him tied up in a teepee. So what it is he's wrapped up in a bunch of hides, like bound, and then he's bound by rope, and all the people tie him up in these ropes, real tight, and they have to they start singing songs and stuff like that, and they start hitting them with these sticks, and when they start doing that and the ceremony starts happening, he started to like levitate off the ground, right? And when he did that, he was getting the vision from the spirit world, right? Like that's what's ended up happening, right? And when the vision ended, the bounds came off, like all the ropes and all the leather and everything, and he flew out, levitated out of the teepee onto the ground, and it freaked out a lot of the people that were there. And there's a lot of mixed up stories about this, but this was a very like a normal ceremony for our people. Like, well, this wasn't anything to be afraid of. Like, there's a lot of spiritual things that would happen for our people all the time. So he came out and he spoke of his visions, and he's like, "Yes, well, like we need to sign it to this area, for the next 7 generations to live, and there's going to be a great peace that's going to bring these. I've seen these tall buildings and these crystal windows and these like different. He had all these different visions, like of the times ahead from that ceremony, that one ceremony. So that's how the tribe and everybody agreed to where our land was going to be, the reserve was going to be for future generations to exist, and then after that, that's when that second meeting happened on June 21st, 1899 at Willow Point, and they made the Treaty 8 negotiations there. And then afterwards there was a nice party, and everybody was exchanging cultures. There was like violins and drums and flutes and all sorts of different little chimes and things that were being played and shown amongst each other, and different dancing and practices were shown to each other, like like it was like kind of a camaraderie of each other's two different lives like meeting, right, for the first time. And I just like to talk a little bit about that because it's not like it's not like they weren't like like uh, totally because like there was already the fur trade going on, so like they like most of us already kind of knew like what the culture was like, how they dressed, like how the settlers dressed at the time, wearing their suits and things like that, their hats and buckles and boots and stuff. So he was already ahead of his game, and prior to the meeting he went and traded in a ton of furs and all these different items to get a bunch of different clothes for not only himself but for others that were there at the meeting. And but yeah, he dressed really nice, and that's how come he looked nice in the meeting, or at the meeting there. And he and it's actually noted by the commissioner saying like these natives we're meeting are actually dressed quite nicely, and they're quite modern in their and who they are and how they're acting and stuff. It's just because he already kind of knew like what was so like like because this guy that the commissioner wanted to fight, like in his personal journal, he wrote in there, he's like, "Oh, I hope these are like the Indians of the old time. I wish for a war." He wanted a war, and he wanted to fight and kill Indians, and that's what he was writing in his book. Go look it up. It's written there. It's in the history. You can go fucking read it for yourself. And but yeah, that's not what they got. That's not what they got. They got very friendly people that were very happy to meet them, and more modern than they expected, and because of the visions of that and whatnot. So yeah, and then after that happened in that time, uh, you know, a few years after, like there's a lot of like the residential school started, and a lot of people were wrongfully taken from their families, due through the Indian Act and of Johnny McDonald's Indian Act, which ended up taking a lot of Native children from their families, and if they weren't given up, then they would be taken by Mounties or by force by law, right? So a lot of these kids are wrongfully put in these schools, and that resulted in my grandfather, I should say, Alexan. He attended the school, and but he back then it was still the culture was still strong. So even though Alexan was this attended the school, he was still very culturally inclined, and but when my grandfather James went, he ended up escaping the residential school and went running to the trap line to go spend it with Headman Mustus at the time, Lewisan. And he ended up staying there with him. And when the Mounties went to look for him, my grandfather's like, "I didn't sign the treaty for this. Like, I didn't sign for these kids to be all taken there and to be mistreated like that. And I don't want my grandson tending. I'll teach him my ways, and he'll learn that." And they left him. They didn't contest to it because he signed the treaty and whatnot, right? But yeah, so my grandfather James was very lucky that he didn't have to go and be subjected to the violence and trauma that was meant to kill the native and save the boy. That misguided propaganda that was just used to help people agree to putting punishment over people that didn't deserve it. So, because they were, like I said, my grandfather was already learning. They were already trading and learning the settlers' languages. Like, there's a lot of Cree words that are actually, like you get the Métis culture, which is French and indigenous people's languages, depending what Métis areas they are Métis are from what area, right? So there's some Cree, there's some Ojibwe down, or down the line, right, in the east and stuff. And So what I'm getting at is, yeah, he ends up learning a lot of that, and he didn't undergo any of the traumas of the residential school. I know that they're like, because my mom had to attend the residential school, so did my dad and all my aunties and uncles. So they told me all the atrocities that happened there. So it was, and that the school in my area only closed down in 1968, right? So I was lucky, and I didn't have to attend that. But a lot of, like I said, a lot of people in my area, and there's a lot of trauma from that school. So I see what the damage is done to my people, like in terms of like culture and spirituality. People have a tough time with it because they were taught so much to hate themselves and thought it wasn't the way of a true way, and yeah. So there's a lot about that, but we'll talk about that in another video. I'll continue here with Mustas and just kind of. So Mustas raised James and taught James how to hunt and trade and trap and trade and live that life. And James, like I said, was just a young boy and grew up there with Alexandre, his dad, and Mustas ended up dying in 1918 during the Spanish flu, because there was a lot of there's a ton, thousands of people that were just dying in our area. And there's actually, I was a part of the finding of one mass grave that was located in Snipe Lake area from that time, from the Spanish flu era, and where they buried him on the hill and stuff. And it was kind of wild, because when we went out there, we're just trying to go find that burial site, right? And these farmers pulled up on us, because it was a farmer's land, so they just pulled up on us with guns and everything, and there was just like a big standoff, and we're showing them the Slavics and where that hill was, and we're like, yeah, there's probably like 1,000 or like at least 1,200 people underneath that hill right now, and they're just like, what? And they just couldn't believe it, and they didn't want to believe it. And yeah, so that was like one of the mass graves I found. And then the second mass grave is in not too far from, it's just kind of like just back here in the deep woods from the Spanish flu. And that was like a bunch of people, like I said, pre-Federation times. There would have been no like I said, during that it would have been during Federation times, but it was just like, that time, that era was so close to pre-Federation that it was like a lot of people's documentation and things like that got lost, or they weren't kept properly and stuff. So like a lot of those graves out there are like they're just kind of unmarked, especially when it comes to like the one in our area. We as our tribe and our people know out here, like, of that grave site. We even marked, like, we did a modification of that area spiritually, and marked it off and stuff like that, of course, right? But yeah, so like during that time though, Mustas was healing a lot of people, and he did heal a lot of people from the Spanish flu. He did save a lot of people, and but in order to do that, there was also a moment where he had to have a ceremony for like at least like 8 different medicine men who became ill from said flu. And so he healed those people in a ceremony in a lodge, right? He healed those 8 medicine men, but it really weakened him, and he got sick from it. But those guys lived; those 8 medicine men lived and went back to their areas to heal and whatnot. But he died. He ended up getting sick, and he died out in this place not too far from the Sucker Creek First Nation, which is known as East Perry, because I know in history they write down all these different ladies that they write down all these different ladies that, like, they say some Auger lady, Nanette Auger was his wife, and all these different women. But to be honest with you, Mustas had a bunch of different wives over his lifetime. But the woman he ended up marrying and dying with, because she ended up getting the Spanish flu as well with him, was her name was Hathleen Kathleen Mustus, and she ended up perishing with him in East Prairie, and she was from East Prairie, that lady Kathleen, and that's how come they buried him. They had buried him out there years ago, and then with his pipe, his medicine pipe, they buried him out there because as a medicine man, he had a medicine healing pipe, right? It was very powerful. And then he was buried there for years and years, and then later on, like years later, I'm just gonna tell this story because I don't care. But years later, our nation, Sucker Creek, had got some. There are some people who were elected into positions of power, you know, like as chiefs and counselors, and they were very interested in moving my great grandfather's grave, right? And you know why they wanted to move it. So they petitioned and they spent all this money to go and find it out there and move it to out here, right, in Sucker Creek. And my grandfather James Mustus was so mad, like he was very mad, like he was very upset, and because they didn't even give any notification to the family that they were doing this. We found out later when there was a big thing being held at the gravesite. Like it was just like being told to us like behind the scenes, right? And the reason why my grandfather was so upset was because he found out that they stole his pipe. They stole my great grandfather's pipe, Headman Mustus's pipe. Those people, the counselors and the chief or whatever, right? And it was said that the guy who stole it was trying to hold a ceremony, and I don't know where the ceremony was or what happened, but they said that like I don't know where it was or where it took place. I mean, but what happened was he was conducting a ceremony with that pipe, and he just fucking dropped dead right in that ceremony, that guy. And I don't know if they destroyed that pipe or threw it away or whatever, but or burnt it or whatever, right? But they were scared to ever use it again after that, right? Because he just fucking died. That guy just died, right? And they're like, what? But to conclude that story, though, is like he was a very well-known man and very loved by a lot of the people, and still held in high regard from our nation. And to this day, he's still honored and with the celebration of the Treaty 8 every year. And we just had our 100 year celebration, centennial. Sorry, 150 year celebration. And yeah, and I just felt like it was necessary to talk about his life. This guy right here, the Headman Mustus, this dude right here. But yeah, he like I said, he lived a very extraordinary life and experience when it came to his spiritual world and the legends that he was a part of. And I felt I'd talk about the truth about what people hear out there and they like to make more of. And while we're at 23 minutes, I hope I can save this video shit. Hold on, we're gonna cut it off here.